Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. As you'll know, if you become a regular listener to this show, we like to bring you not just some of the key financial talking points in the music industry, but also some good stories as well, and tips from people who've been in the business for a while, who might be able to give us a particular insight into how it works. And well, we've talked to a few musicians so far this year, but today, here's someone who's worked as a sound engineer, run a PA company in Sheffield, was the tour manager for the Arctic Monkeys in their breakout era, and all the way through to the stadiums, and is currently Director of Operations at Tramlines Festival in Sheffield. Our guest today, Timm Cleasby. Hello, Tim. Welcome to The Price of Music.
Thank you very much. Good to see you both.
Now, look, you've got such a broad-ranging CV. We didn't really know where to start, but I think maybe we should kick off and talk about your current job, which is Operations Director at, amongst other places, Tramlines Festival in Sheffield, which is, for people who've never been there, what's the capacity of Tramlines now? How many people go each year?
It's about 40,000.
40,000, because I can remember it when it first started in an array of pubs, and the main stage was on a green. So it's evolved into this massive thing over the years. How long have you been a part of it?
I've been involved since the start. So the very first year, Matt Elders got asked to be involved with it, and I was working with the Monkeys at the time, and he said, I want you involved if I'm going to be involved. So that was kind of like the way that I got involved. In the start, it wasn't quite the role that I'm doing now. It was a bit more like step back. But my role's evolved over the years, and I'm now, in charge of all the operations.
So tell us then, that's the first question, isn't it? What is this fancy title? What are the responsibilities of the operations director?
Wow. Well, they're quite far-reaching, and particularly with Tramlines, my role's a little bit more than just operations, because I've been involved for so long. I'm the longest-standing member of staff, probably me and Alex Deadman, I think. And so the role is basically anything to do with how the festival operates. So, toilets, queuing, in and out, security, policing, counter-terrorism, medics, insurances. It's all the interesting fun bits, basically.
And when did it move onto its current site? And was there any sort of financial peril involved when you thought we're gonna step up a gear here and we're gonna make this significantly bigger? But that obviously, does that bring some risk?
Oh yeah. So we moved in 2018 to Hillsborough Park, and I'd be lying if I didn't say there is always financial peril, no matter what you're doing and when you're doing it. Right from the very start, there's always a risk that you're gonna lose loads of money. People will not turn up and they won't drink your beer, and you're gonna lose loads of money. And I think for a lot of the early years, we lost money most years. Most years the directors had to keep topping up the funds to keep the thing rolling. It's only actually when we moved to Hillsborough Park that we actually consistently made some money. And so, yes, it was a huge risk and a huge sort of, wow, what are we doing moment. But myself and Sarah kind of sat together, and it was the 10th year that we'd be operating in 2018. And so we thought, you know what? This is the year. Let's go big or go home. And so we went and did it, and it was a huge success, and has been since. And it's just been the most positive move for us.
But it's the size of gamble, though. I mean, you're gambling with a smaller amount of money when the festival is smaller. I mean, it still means you can lose money, but surely the gamble is a bigger gamble, isn't it? You're putting a bigger wager on a festival when it grows to that size.
We kind of went all in 2018.
But is that worrying when you suddenly see additional noughts? Because you're juggling with figures you've never juggled with before.
Yeah, so the budget just like I don't think any of us realised just how big a jump it is. You know, when you're going from we were sort of 20,000 capacity at Ponderosa, so not bad, but we were looking to get up to 30 and 40. And so, yes, the numbers are, you know, they're quite eye watering when you get to this level of working, and they don't ever get smaller. They only get bigger each year. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the last couple of years, we've seen huge leaps. You know, since the pandemic, really, there's just been huge leaps each year. Everything's gone up.
I mean, we were going to ask you about the big challenges sort of coming back from COVID, because I guess obviously there were, when it was happening, everything was shutting down, people couldn't do anything. But then since then, I know festivals had problems with costs and kind of making everything work. But how have you found it? What's been the impact of the, I guess, the longer term, sort of follow on from COVID?
Yeah, so well, there's been supply chain issues. So a lot of people in COVID went and found other things to do, and a lot of them just didn't come back. They just stayed away from events because, you know, events they're great fun, they're really good to do, they're quite enjoyable, but they're very risky. And it's not like a job where you go to work, you get paid, you can switch off. You know, it's a bit more full on than that. So I think a lot of people left. And then with that, you know, as soon as things become scarce, they become more expensive. And so the prices just hike up and hike up. So it's, you know, it's a huge challenge. And for us, you know, we've managed to fare that relatively well. We had issues where we'd order things and they go, yeah, that's fine. And then, you know, a month out of the festival, they go, oh yeah, we can't supply that. So then you're scrambling around, but we've got such a strong team at Tramlines that everyone just pulls together and we get the job done. So huge challenges, massive risks financially, huge amounts of like the price hikes have been probably the most challenging, I think, because you set your ticket price based on what you expect to be spending, and then your prices all go up, and you're like, oh my god, where's all the money going?
Mm-hmm. And what has gone up then? Things like, I mean, right down to, well, you mentioned the toilets, getting the toilets, the tents and things like that. Marquee prices through the roof.
Yeah, everything's gone up. You know, all the prices have gone up. I don't think there's a single budget line that hasn't gone up in the last 2 or 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, there's some that have not gone up as much as others. The bigger increases are the ones generally where you need more people. So security, you know, the cost of living crisis has hit everyone, including everyone that works for you, whether they're through a contractor or whatever. So, you know, we try and make sure that we're paying at least, you know, living wage throughout all our contractors, you know, a bit more. We don't have any control over the contractors' prices, but all of them work to at least living wage. So once you've got, you know, we have something like 400 security staff. You know, if that goes up by £3 an hour, and they're all working, you know, like we do. What do we do with security? They do about a 15-hour shift. So you multiply that by 400, and then £3 or whatever it is, and then 3 days. It's a lot of money that suddenly it just goes.
I think listeners will be quite interested. You mentioned about setting the ticket prices. They'll be interested to know how you do it. So you have to do all the maths. So you have to add up, and I guess to a certain extent, maybe try and second guess how much some of these commodities will go up in price, or the workforce will go up in price. But you do all the maths, and then you set the ticket price as to what hopefully leaves you with a slight profit at the end.
Yeah, that's the sort of basis, and we do try and second guess. You know, we budget early on, and we include an increase in that budget. So we try and make sure that we're covering off those costs where possible. But yeah, inevitably, if things go up, it leads into your profit.
And what, talking of costs going up, what effect this is rumoured to be true, what effect has increased fees for the top line artists had? Because when you're talking about demand, there are a number of festivals out there. Some of them are all trying to book the same band. So if the band's in demand, they're going to ask, they can set their price. And from what I hear, top line headline prices have gone up.
Yeah, they have, definitely. There's no doubt. We're paying more for headliners than we ever have in the past. Partly because we're being ambitious and trying to book bigger bands each year, but partly because there is that supply and demand, and there's been quite a lot of festivals over the last couple of years that have disappeared, and so the market's actually shrinking for these people, and so they're more and more in demand because everyone's after the same artist to sort of push. So it's tricky. It's quite a jump that we've seen in price, I think, for the headliners. Yeah, certainly from 2018.
I mean, one of the things we've been sort of talking about a bit, haven't we, Steve? Is this idea of headliner prices going up, but also then lower down the bills. Some artists sort of worrying and stressing about whether they can put their full show on, whether the fees add up for them. Are you hearing that from some of those artists too about what they're looking for and how they're feeling about festival bookings?
Not massively. No, we tend to because we put offers out basically based on what we think they're worth and what we think they're worth in our market, because each market is different. Like the Ratons, for instance, who are a local band, can sell 20,000 tickets in Rotherham. Down south, maybe not. So there's other market forces in place rather than just the sort of the sort of global price of these artists. There's certain bands that transcend that, obviously, like the Monkees. I think they can just demand whatever sort of money they want, pretty much, and people will pay it because they'll sell tickets still. And that's the drive. You want to sell tickets, so you want to make sure that the artist that you're looking to book. So, like this year, for instance, Paolo Nutini, he was our most popular artist across the weekend. So, you pay a bit more of a premium because they're going to sell you more tickets. And we also do a bit of a survey with our customers saying, who do you want to see? And we get an idea of like where their heads are at. So that gives us an idea of where to go looking for bookings.
Are they realistic when they answer that? I can imagine everyone sort of saying, "Yeah, we'd like to see Oasis, the reformed ABBA." And,
yeah, we get all of that. Yeah, there's some firm favourites. The Monkees is always up there. I think everyone would love to see Arctic Monkeys at Tramlines, myself included. There, the Cortinas are always quite high up. We've had them a couple of times now, but they're still always really high up on the list. There's obviously Oasis and Pulp. Pulp would be great. I'd love to see Pulp at Tramlines. That's one we just keep trying for. But there's other things. When we look to book, you have your wish list, and then you go out to agents and say, "Oh, are they touring?" And they go, "Oh no, they're not touring," or "They're already booked to do that," or "They're recording an album," or "No, they just don't want to play in Sheffield." So there's all these different things where you've got your dream lineup, and then everyone scuppers it.
Is that a thing is that a thing someone said though? They don't want to play in Sheffield. That seems like a really
there are artists that don't necessarily. It might be that they don't want to play in Sheffield that year.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, so they've got different schedules and different places that they work into, or they might have exclusivity, with other festivals where you just can't book them because they're too close.
Okay, yeah, it's not taken against Sheffield. That's
no,
reassuring.
No. Just before we get onto, because I'd like to dig back into your early days in the industry and the experience you've accrued to be able to do this job. Just one last question on Tramlines is what's in your head? What's your deadline for having the headliners in place these days? Because the other thing about competition between festivals and trying to get the right headliners is everyone seems to be booking earlier and earlier. Is there a point? Is there a cut-off point where you start getting nervous if you haven't got all the big names at the top?
Yeah, definitely. And that we try and we have conversations with headliners around the time of the festival that we're doing. So we're always looking to next year So we started. I think we started talking to headliners this year in sort of May and June, and starting to get a feel of who was available for next year. So it starts quite early, and then I think as you're approaching Christmas time, if you don't have your artists, your headliners kind of nailed down, that's when it starts getting a bit nerve-wracking. But even so, we've had years where we've not had headliners booked until after Christmas, and still managed to pull together an amazing lineup. So, yeah, there is definitely a moment where you're sort of going, "Oh, that's good to get them nailed down, please."
Yeah. A relaxing Christmas or a less relaxing Christmas.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, Steve, so we'd love to go back, I suppose, to the origin story, not to make you sound like a Marvel superhero, although, you can enjoy, but like, you've had such a long and varied CV, but like, what was your first entry into the music business? How did you get started?
It was pretty much by accident. I was kind of more interested in photography when I first started. Although no, I wasn't. I was really interested in music, but I wanted to be in a band. But I was absolutely shit at singing or playing guitar or anything. I really wanted to be a rock star. So I told my careers advisors I wanted to be a rock star, and they said, "Don't be stupid, get a proper job." So yeah, it was. I was kind of sort of. I'd moved to Sheffield. I was hanging around with just local bands really, and I kind of fell into just roadieing for them and just pushing the boxes. And we were doing some recordings in their basements that I really enjoyed. And then one day I said, "Look, I'm sick of you sounding shit, so can I please do your sound?" And they went, "Oh my God, yes." So I did sound first at the Nelson Mandela building, which I'm sure you might remember, Steve, from back in the day. And I said to the engineer there, I said, "I'm doing sound for the support band. I've never done it before." And he was brilliant. He just went, "Great, let me show you. What do you need?" So I explained what I knew, and then he showed me a few other bits and taught me quite a lot in one night. And then from there, it kind of did a lot more of local bands, set up my own PA company in Sheffield, got involved with another bigger PA company in Sheffield, and then started touring with them on a sort of European level as a PA tech and front of house engineer. So it was an interesting start, definitely, and a lot of it was for free. There wasn't a lot of money back then for me, but you learn through cutting your teeth in them, because you do so many varied gigs in different size venues. So I think in my first sort of 4 years, I'd gone from doing the sort of toilet scene of 200 to 400 caps up to, the clubs, and then into theatres, and then arenas, and then stadiums by 1995. So that was quite a sort of journey of gaining experience.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And is that how you ended up being tour manager guy then? Or was there something else before you went out as a TM?
I'd sort of, so I worked my way up as an engineer, and then I came back to Sheffield and I wanted to study to learn to produce. So I went to Red Tape, and whilst I was at Red Tape, I got a job at the lead mill as the head engineer for a few years. And that's always interesting, because you're on the other side of things. So you're actually assisting other engineers and making a lot of connections at that point. And then the tour management came about because Graham Wrench was the booker at the lead mill, and he managed a band called Seafruit.
I remember them.
Yeah,
they played in all white coats, didn't they?
They did, yeah, in the lab coats.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah, they were good. They were really good. Jeff and Alan and Tom Hogg and Joe Newman and a bunch of them. It was really good fun, And that was, I started doing sound for them. They supported In Excess at the Octagon, and then Jeff said, "Right, we want you to do sound for us, but we need a tour manager as well." And I went, "All right, I'll give that a go." And that's how I learned. Well, that's how I started out in tour managing, was with Seafruit, and very quickly almost got fired because we were out on the road and the guys were doing quite well and getting a lot of interviews, and we were late for an interview, and I very flippantly phoned the interviewer and said, "Oh, sorry, we're running late. We're going to be a couple of hours late." And got a phone call from Graham going, "What the hell are you playing at? You can't do this. You need to come back through us." So yeah, that was quite a baptism of fire, but it was good fun, good learning process.
I mean, the TM job is fascinating because, I mean, I'm just curious about how it works and like what stage of plan you get involved and how across the budget you are. Like, was that just like a learn on the job, figure it out experience, or did you have people explain to you this is what a TM does and when you do it and how you do it?
No, it was a learn on the job, definitely. Yeah, it was definitely like figuring because at the time Seafreight weren't massive, so we were doing those small level gigs where you're in a van driving up down the M1 constantly, figuring out where to stay, figuring out how to get to places, learning the sort of show advance, learning the sort of settlement process and arguing with promoters about costs, and definitely a learn on the job. And generally, as a tour manager, you get involved after the dates are booked, so you don't really have much of a say of routing. As the bands get bigger, then you can have a little bit more of a say, and agents will come to you and say, right, we're thinking about doing these 2 shows. What do you think of that travel? What's the cost implication? Because obviously, if you've got 2 shows that are miles apart and you've got 50 people to get from A to B and they've all got to get on a flight and you've got to freight all the gear on a flight, then that soon becomes very expensive as opposed to traveling a few hundred miles in a tour bus overnight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. How much has it changed as well, Tim? Because I imagine when you were starting out with Seafruit, a lot of when you're talking about settling up at the end of the night, I imagine some of that was some of that still in cash.
Yeah, most of it was cash settlements. Yeah, even later when I was touring with the Monkeys, we still did an element of sort of cash settlements because I had a lot of cash expenses on the road.
Right.
So I'd take a few grand in cash each night just so I could pay PDs and I could cover hotel costs and that kind of stuff. So regularly you'd be sort of traveling with a bunch of different currencies in cash in a sort of hideaway somewhere. usually like just stuffed in my bag basically.
I mean, I had a question down here where I just scribbled down, did you have a float? Well, I didn't realise the float was going to be 2 or 3 grand, though. Hidden away in a bag somewhere.
2 or 3 grand was actually quite low, really. When we were touring with the Monkeys on the bigger shows, we used to have quite a big float that we'd split between myself and the production manager. Because you've got such a large crew and you've got these cash expenses, we'd pull. Generally, we'd do it the night before, so we'd know that we were coming up to PD day. So I'd say to the promoter, right, I'm going to need 20 grand off you in whatever currency. And so then we got that, and then we could just divvy them out the next day. So we weren't holding that amount of cash regularly.
Right. I love the. We should explain just for people who don't know. PD is, what's it stand for? Per diem. It's basically it's pocket money for either the band or crew, which is distributed on a daily or weekly basis because no one trusts them to have any money in their pocket by within 48 hours if you give them too much cash.
Yeah, we used to do it weekly.
Did you?
Yeah, and I was quite strict with it as well. I used to be like, "These are your PDs. You're not getting out for another week, so you need to learn to budget."
I love the idea of how suspicious a tour manager looks as well, out of the context of a tour. Like if you're a bloke on the street with a bag full of different currency cash walking down, if you're not with a tour bus nearby, you're in danger of being arrested.
It's so confusing, though, isn't it? When you do a European tour or something, and again, going back to the old days before you could pay for merch with credit cards, you just got bags of different cash, and then you've got to charge different currencies, obviously, on different nights. Your board at the back for the T-shirt has got to be changed, and then you've got to work out, what it is in this country. Yeah. How much is this worth? And then at some point, I imagine, if you can't get rid of all the money in PDs, someone's got to stop at a bank.
Yeah, that was generally me. By the time I got home, I'd usually got, probably, I don't know, a couple of grand in various currencies, bits of, particularly in the European tours, if you're going, when I first started as a TM, there was still a lot of different currencies. So we weren't all just euros. And so you'd end up with francs and Deutschmarks and Kroner, and, you'd end up with all these different currencies, and we're like, what am I going to do with all this? So then I had to go into the bank and say, right, I need to transfer all this, and then I need to put it in. I'd be like, where have you been? What have you been doing?
We need to ask you some questions, sir.
Well, funnily enough, that's happened before. I was on a flight, and I knew I'd got quite a bit of cash because we were going to America, I think, and we'd just been in Europe, so I'd still got, euros. I'd still got some Swedish francs. I'd got some Japanese yen. I'd got all sorts. I'd probably got about 15 grand in cash, and I kind of guessed at the amounts because you have to declare it all on this form. So I guessed at the amounts, and then got off the flight, and they went, "Oh, you've got this cash. Can we see it?" And then we got it out, and I started counting it, and then I went miles out, and they went, "This is not right." And I was like, "I know," because my bag was in the overhead locker, and I didn't want to get all this money out and start counting it on the plane, so I had to make an educated guess, and I got it wrong. And they were like, "Yeah, but this isn't right." I was like, "I know, please don't arrest me," because I had to go through it a lot, and eventually I ended up with about 4 people in this room just standing over me going, "We think you're trying to launder money." And I was like, "I'm not. This is what I do. This is how I've got all this money. This is exactly." And I had to get all my laptop out and show me accounts and everything. It was a long process, and I honestly thought I was going to get locked up.
Is that a sort of situation where you're like, free tickets? Have you heard this band?
I don't know. I think that's bribery.
Yeah, no, I'm not a legal advisor here. What was it like working with the Monkees as they were progressing through the ranks like that? Because I imagine it's not just that every tour got bigger than the last, but it happened pretty quickly, didn't it? They went from, it was a double speed. I mean, what was it like kind of working from your point of view with as it got bigger and bigger and the ambitions improved?
It was very exciting, I have to say. The first year with them in 2005 was, well, probably the first couple of years was a little bit like, you've seen the scenes of the Beatles getting chased down the road by loads of screaming fans. It was very much like that at times. Me and Alex would just be hot-footing it away from a horde of screaming people, trying to find some sort of, place we could hide away. So there's a bit of that. And then obviously like the growth in terms of like your own personal development was huge. I'd done fairly big gigs up to that point, but when we did the cricket ground in 2007 in Manchester, that was quite a huge step in terms of, you're going from, you've done sort of the bigger shows as a sound engineer or whatever, but never as a tour manager. So that sort of whole learning curve was huge. In 2 years, I had to go from tour managing, up to a couple of thousand to tour managing 50,000 cap gigs, and it was a lot to take on.
And how big is your team by that point? How big has the crew got as well? Because you start out, as you say, with a band like Seafruit, you're multitasking as driver and sound engineer or guitar tech or everything. But then then obviously more people come on board, and you've got to start employing people that you can rely on. You need good crew and experienced crew by that point, don't you? Which, going back to what we were saying about COVID, we lost an awful lot of really experienced people who'd been out there on the road, who knew what they were doing, because they'd gone off to do something else, because obviously they hadn't earned any money for 2 years. Yeah. But that's what you need. And the team, as I say, I imagine by the time you get to those big stadiums, there's a big team.
It's pretty big, yeah. Like, you've got your core crew that tour with you constantly. So you've got your sort of lighting designer, sound engineers, backline techs. You've got all those kind of core people, production manager. There's a huge list. I think the core team was about 18 or so. And then when we were doing the bigger shows, you're sort of up to, 5 or 6 tour buses. So you're up to about 50 or 60 people at least.
And
the touring.
is it part of your responsibility as a TM? Are you involved in the budgets that come with this? Because you've got to decide: do we travel, travel in a nice vehicle, stay in nice hotels, or do we hire tour buses? What's the financial difference between this and this? What's practically better? What's financially better?
Yeah, so with the Monkeys, I wrote pretty much every budget we did for the 5 years I was with them. It was my. I used to get given a list of dates off Charlie from 13, and with that would be the fees and the percentage splits, and I'd know pretty much where we'd be in terms of selling out or not, so I could work out where we'd be, so I could do all that maths right away and go, right, well, that's my total budget, and then I could figure out what we need to spend in terms of hotel, tour buses, flights, crew, everything. So all those costs used to sit into my budget, and then I'd present that back to Ian and Jeff and say, this is where we're at in terms of profit.
Right.
So it's quite an in-depth process that, writing the budgets used to take me a couple of days to sort of figure out and make sure I got my hotel cost something like, and the tour bus cost something like, and the flight cost something like.
Yeah, because it's. It must be incredibly decent because you can't miss things out, can you? Because you say, right, tour bus, but then do you have to budget fuel on top of that and all those sort of things?
It depends where you're touring. So European, generally the tour bus cost is a daily cost that includes everything.
Right, okay.
Or it used to be. It might have changed now, but it definitely used to be. America is very different. So America, you've got your bus cost, you've got your driver costs, you've got your driver PDs, you've got your fuel costs. So you've got to factor all that in, and then there's tolls and other crap that they just come and say, oh, you've got to pay this. So a lot of it is talking to, and the way that I used to do it is I'd talk to my suppliers. So I'd find a supplier and then decide I want to go with them, and then I'd say to them, right, you need to tell me what I need to budget in terms of for your supply. So for your tour bus, what do I need? What's the bus cost? What's the trailer cost? What's the driver cost? What other costs am I going to expect? And then I'd put all them in my budget.
And then, and I guess do you have to do some level of insurance as well?
Yeah, we had tour insurance for each tour, and that's different for each territory. The other thing that you've got to sort of think about as well is taxes, local taxes, which nobody tells you about until you actually get there. And then they go, oh no, we were withholding 20% of your fee for taxes. And you're like, what's wrong with that? Certainly in the early days, I got really stung with them. But then you kind of know, and there's things you can do. So you can apply for, like there's tax agreements between countries. So you might be able to apply for a reduced rate or for them not to withhold anything. But it's something that you've got to think about and you've got to budget for.
I mean, a lower down, obviously not at the Arctic Monkeys level, but I imagine because you just never know what's going to happen on tour either. It's almost like you need to budget, but you also need an emergency budget for if the van breaks down or, I don't know, but slightly higher up the scale if you're in the States and then maybe there's a crisis at home, somebody needs to fly back. There are all sorts of things that you may end up spending money on that you hadn't necessarily budgeted for as well.
Yeah, there's a line in my budget called contingency.
Oh, okay.
Which covers all of that. So I'd budget everything, and then at the bottom, I'd do a percentage of the overall cost as a contingency.
Right. God, you're good, aren't you? No wonder you went all the way, Tim. You thought of everything. What I will say is that as a tour manager, I was trying to work out what sort of temperament and what skills you need. But you have to be, you're a fixer, you're a therapist, you're a public relations man, and you've got to be a good negotiator. I mean, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, all of them. And you've got to be very organised. You've got to be really pragmatic in your planning. You've got to be a little bit creative at times because there's certain bits of your job where you've got to think creatively, and you've got to do all. Like I used to do all the PR with the band, so I used to take them to interviews. So there's that negotiation as well with the press. That, like I mentioned before, I learned early on how to do that properly rather than just bull in a china shop. There's a lot of different skills to be a tour manager, a lot of different skills, and you've got to have different hats that you wear at different times.
Yeah. And just, I think Stuart's got a question about pay, but just before we get to it, can I just ask, and this is not really financially relevant, but what do you organise on days off? Because there is nothing worse than a band that is bored.
Yeah. So, well, we used to generally we'd go out for dinner somewhere. There'd usually be right, we're going out and we're going to do this, or we'd go and have days out. We'd find things to do. But it wasn't always me that did that. You know, some of the crew would go, right, I found this great restaurant in this city. We've got a day off. Let's go and do that. Or I've seen this amazing museum. Let's go and have a look at that. Or there's this, baseball game. Can you get us tickets for that? So there's all these different things. But yeah, you definitely need to have a bit of an eye on the days off. Although I used to spend a lot of my days off really boringly doing accounts.
Well, I didn't think it was going to be any fun for the guy at the top. I imagine it's more for everyone else. One of the reasons I asked, the first proper tour, the first tour that I did with a band on a tour bus was with a band called Therapy back in the 90s. And therapy could not exactly get into trouble, but they would, they needed to be reined in, occasionally, or entertained, to the point where on one tour, the tour manager brought along a Subbuteo table. Right, it's got the Subbuteo pitch stuck to a piece of wood, so you could get the Subbuteo. If you had a day off, you got a day room at the hotel, and then put the Subbuteo table in it. And they quite happily. Andy Counts from Therapy is pretty good at Subbuteo. He had plenty of practice.
We had a ping pong table that we took with us. We used to play ping pong, and our security guys used to teach us how to box. And yeah, we had all sorts of stuff.
Wow. So yeah, I've been given the nosy question to ask you about pay, but without telling us how much you got paid, but how does a TM get paid? Like, is it like a set fee, or do you get like performance related bonuses if nobody gets lost and everything goes to plan? Or how does it kind of work in terms of how you make money as a TM in this industry?
In my experience, other TMs might have different deals, but I used to be just on a day rate. And it was a set day rate for every single day that I was away from home. So it didn't matter what I was doing. As soon as I set foot out of the house to go to work until I got back in the front door, I was getting paid. And that was my deal. I'm sure there are other tour managers that might take a percentage of there might be performance related stuff, but I never had any of them. So it was just a basic set day rate. It was a good set day rate. I was always quite pleased to be working and busy, and but yeah, it's and I think that's for the majority of tour managers that that's the case.
And I guess you made a decision to come off the road, and like everything we talked about in the first part of this show about how Tramlines has been growing, sounds like that was a really good decision. But do you miss it? Like, do you find yourself kind of wistfully planning a family holiday with lines of a budget, or are you really? Was that a good decision? You're really pleased, with the timing and what you did.
It was the right decision for me, definitely. Yeah. I was getting to the point where I was starting to resent being away from home quite so much. I'd got a growing family, and they were growing up without me being there, and that was very hard. And so I saw an opportunity with Tramlines, and I decided I was going to set up myself as a photographer again as well. So that was, I started out doing that when I was really young, and did a bit of gig press photography. So I thought I'd try and get back into doing photography. So it was the right decision for me at the time. There is times where I miss the job. When you stood on the stage, like when we headlined Glastonbury the first time, and you stood on the stage and you look out and you see that sea of people all singing back the tunes, and you're part of making that happen. That's quite a feeling. And I have replaced that with Tramlines now. I can go out once a year, stand on the stage, watch the headlines, and go, yeah, I did a bit of that. So it was the right thing for me to do, definitely. But to with your point with like planning, no, I don't. My wife is the tour manager. So we got when we go on holiday, I give her my passport and I go, right, you're the TM, I'm the band.
Brilliant.
Did she give you a PD?
I was just going to say, does she give you PDs?
I'm not that lucky, no. I'm not trusted.
We were going to ask you what's next, and obviously, like Tramlines, you talk about that. That's still going. But what's your? I guess your not just even your professional ambitions. What are your personal? What are you when you look forward? What are you still wanting to do? What are you wanting to happen with Tramlines? Where's it all going?
I mean, Tramlines is just a huge success, and is really good to see where it's got to. I don't think we've got too much ambition to grow much more than we are at the minute, purely because we don't want to move from Hillsborough Park, and we're kind of at the capacity of where we can be with Hillsborough Park. What we always do with Tramlines is we look for ways to make it better within what we've got. So we'll always be looking at whether we can, put some other activities in or something else that makes it more festival-y. So this year we had a new bar called Pint Corner, which was lovely. It's like a real ale bar under a tent. So yeah, there's always things that we're looking at. And then I'm just like, professionally, I'm still involved with Slam Dunk and Live at Leeds, and will be again next year. I do a few other bits. There's a podcast festival that James O'Hara, who was one of the founders of Tramlines, has set up, which is where I met you guys, and I'm doing the production management on that. So I'm quite enjoying doing those kind of little bits, and I'm not really. I haven't got much ambition in terms of like professionally anymore. I'm kind of at the point where I'm happy just doing the bits I'm doing. My personal ambition is we are planning a move to the seaside. So I'm hopefully going to be living over near Bridlington in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a short-term fulfillment of that ambition.
Yeah.
Really...
Well, I mean, I'm surrounded by boxes at the minute because we're frantically packing. We've just got one last bit for the sale to complete, which should be happening this week. So once that's done, then we'll be moving.
I don't think I could ever move. It's just too many records and CDs to put in boxes. I don't think. I mean, it's a lot. And then having to put them all back on shelves. Yeah. I think it's easier just to stay here. Much as the seaside sounds nice.
What you need is a team of roadies and boxes.
I'll do a budget. See how long it will take. It might, if it overruns, I'm going to have to dig into my contingency money. Oh, man.
Give them a fistful of rubles. I mean, one thing you said about Tramlines there, actually, that I have a question about, is that quite a strong decision when you've got something that's growing and successful to have that point where you go, you don't have to keep growing. You don't have to keep getting bigger. You can say, this is big enough and we can make it better. Because I imagine there can be a pressure to think, well, we did 40,000 this year. Let's do 50 next year, 60. And that's where people can get in over their heads maybe sometimes where it becomes too big or not as good.
I think you kind of got to look at how it operates. And this is where my job kind of comes in. You've got to kind of look at how the festival works, how it works, the nuts and bolts of it. Not just the band's playing, but how do people move from A to B? Where do they queue up? How does that work? If we put another 5,000 people in that mix, what's that going to look like? Have we got the capacity safely to put another 5,000 people into that mix? So you've got all these decisions to make that are not necessarily a financial decision. Some of it's got to be on like experience for your customers. If you can keep ramming it, and I've still got capacity to put people in and get them out safely, but it gets to a point where it feels busy. It feels like there's enough. So there's all those things that you sort of look at rather than just, can we fit another 5,000 people in?
That's fair enough. I've been to festivals where that's happened, and it's when something tips over from nice and you can walk around to feeling a bit,
I think that's really admirable. That, yeah.
I mean, the last question we had was kind of probably the hardest one to answer, because I think everything you've said has been about your path has been very individual to you, and things happened and it went. But we were going to ask about what advice you have to people. And I guess you must meet people now who look at what you've done and say, sort of pick your brains for advice. But do you have any advice for someone who's thinking of following a similar path to you, whether that is working on a festival, whether it's working in TM? What sort of tips might you have?
I think so. I do actually. I do a bit of teaching of students who are just starting out in their careers, and I kind of show them my career path, just pretty much as we've discussed it, really, and how the kind of bits connect. I think that's one of the important things, and that's one of the things that I sort of talk about is you don't know at the time of meeting someone how important they're going to be to your career down the line. So I always try and impress on people that without me having a level of, sort of professionalism and kindness to some of my colleagues, I wouldn't be where I am today because certain connections wouldn't have happened. So we've talked a lot about Seafruit and Graham, and I met Graham. Matt tour managed Seafruit, and the singer of Seafruit was Jeff Barradale, who became the Arctic Monkeys tour manager. And then when the Arctic Monkeys needed a tour manager, Jeff asked me. And at the point I met Jeff, I'd got no idea that that's where that had landed. And then there was another point where I was the PA tech for the Human League, and there was a band supporting them. I forget the name of them, but their front of house engineer was called Andy Shillito, and Andy Shillito was struggling a little bit, and I helped him out, and we became good friends, passed each other loads of work, and then he became the monitor engineer for the Darkness in 2003. And then when he went on to become their front of house engineer, he asked me to fill his boots as a monitor engineer. Mm-hmm. So that's like that. I think that's like a really important bit of advice is, you don't know when you're going to bump into these people down your career. So just be nice and be professional and helpful. And then the other bit I think would be always, and I've said I haven't really got any goals now, but always have some goals. So when I started out as a engineer, I set myself a goal to be a stadium engineer. And then when I reached that in 1995, when I was touring with Bon Jovi, I was like, right, well, what next? So then I set myself a goal of becoming a producer, which is why I went to Red Tape to learn to become a producer. Didn't actually become a producer, but went on to something else and then set other goals. So there was a goal of like tour managing a band that headlined Glastonbury, and that happened with the Monkeys. So all these bits of setting goals, it gives you something to kind of focus on and to work towards. So I think those are kind of my two big bits of advice, really. And just put yourself out there. Nobody's going to come looking for you until you get to a level where you've done a lot and you've got a good reputation. So you need to put yourself out there. You need to go out, make connections, talk to people. When I first started out, I went and I found bands to hang out with and did all that stuff, and that's how you make those early connections. So that's my 3 bits of advice.
Also, I just love the fact that you just casually threw in when I was on tour with Bon Jovi. Stuart's face was, an absolute picture. And I know we're out of time for this episode, but I think we may have to do a part 2 which we just dedicate to life on the road with bands you never imagined that you'd been on tour with. I think
next time Steve's on holiday, we'll just do a Bon Jovi and Darkness Tour Tales episode, and I'll be in my happy place then.
Yeah, very much. Tim, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you for giving us some of your time, and good luck with next year's Tramlines.
Thank you very much.
Timm Cleasby, what a career, Stuart. Some very interesting insights there, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think, the thing I like best is when he mentioned at the end, kindness being his advice to people. Be kind to people on your way up, because you never know how that's just such good advice, I think. You don't have to be climbing a ladder and stamping on everyone else's face. You can be nice to people and it will pay you back. So what a nice man. But
The only question I suddenly realised I should have asked was probably one: do you have to be good at maths? Were you good at maths at school? And two, did you ever have to take any sort of business or accountancy courses so that when you're balancing up the books on tour, you know what's going on? Although I think actually when you were a major touring band, I think they take their own accountants out on the road with them. But there's a lot of financial juggling, isn't it?
hang on, I want to know about accountants going on the road. That must be quite fun.
Oh yeah, do you not know
accountant.
there are rock and roll accountants?
Yeah.
I'll tell you about it after we've come off air. Thank you once again to Tim, and if you've enjoyed the show, please do subscribe to us in your podcast app and give us a review and a rating. And of course, feel free to mention us to friends and colleagues, or even rave about us on social media. We don't mind. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show at some point, something financially themed that's always baffled you about the music biz, you can email us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, if you've found some loose change down the back of your folks' sofa and you'd like to support the show, we now have our own Patreon page at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. Thank you once again, everybody. Take care. Cheerio.